I never dreamed the bridesmaid helping me walk down the aisle was meeting my husband in secret until the phone pinged with her location at 2 in the morning. That sound still echoes in my head, sharp and cold like a blade slicing through the last piece of peace I had left. But before that moment, before the sleepless nights and the shaking hands, there was a time I believed my life was perfect. Or at least, close enough to it that I didn't question the small cracks that were already spreading beneath the surface. I met Daniel when I was 26, during a volunteer project at the local community center. He wasn't the most handsome man in the room, but there was something disarming about his laugh, low, unpretentious, the kind that made you feel seen. He remembered little things, like the way I took my coffee or how I always hummed while reading reports. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. When I told my best friend Chloe, she screamed so loudly over the phone that I had to hold it away from my ear. Chloe and I had been inseparable since university. She was the one who helped me through my first heartbreak, who showed up with soup when I was sick, who made every bad day bearable. She was the sister I chose, and I trusted her more than anyone else. In the months leading up to the wedding, Chloe became my unofficial planner. She loved details: flowers, seating charts, color palettes. She said she wanted everything to be perfect for me, and I believed her. Daniel worked long hours, so it made sense that Chloe and I spent most evenings finalizing the wedding logistics. Sometimes, she'd stop by Daniel's office to drop off fabric swatches or surprise him with coffee for both of us. I remember joking once, "You're seeing more of my fiancé than I am these days." She laughed, a little too quickly, brushing it off as enthusiasm. I thought nothing of it. Why would I? We'd always shared everything: our fears, our dreams, our secrets. Or at least, I thought we did. The night before the engagement dinner, we stayed up late at my apartment, surrounded by half-wrapped party favors. Chloe was scrolling through playlists on her phone while sipping wine. She looked tired, almost distant, as if her thoughts were somewhere else. When I asked if she was okay, she smiled faintly. "Just thinking about life," she said. "You're lucky, you know. Daniel really loves you." At the time, it felt like a compliment. Later, those words would replay in my head like a cruel riddle. Our engagement party was beautiful: soft lights, friends, family, the hum of laughter and music. Daniel was attentive, affectionate, always reaching for my hand. Chloe floated between guests like she owned the night, radiant in her red dress. She and Daniel shared inside jokes that made others laugh too, and though I noticed it, I didn't dwell on it. She'd been part of our relationship since the beginning. Their familiarity was natural. Looking back, I remember one strange detail. When the photographer asked to take a picture of the three of us, Chloe placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder, not mine. The moment lasted barely 2 seconds, but when I saw the photo later, something about it made my stomach tighten. Her hand lingered too comfortably. I brushed it off. I told myself I was overthinking, that jealousy was a dangerous seed in any friendship. Weeks passed, and life moved as it should: cake tastings, fittings, vendor calls. I started noticing how Daniel became more protective of his phone. Once, I reached for it to check the time, and he snatched it back so fast that I laughed nervously. He muttered something about work confidentiality. Chloe, sitting beside us, shifted in her chair and stared at her drink. Then there were the unexplained absences. Daniel said he had late meetings. Chloe said she was visiting her cousin. Oddly, both would go silent at the same times, unreachable for hours. But my heart refused to connect the dots. It's strange how love can blind you not just to the truth, but to the pain hiding in plain sight. 3 weeks before the wedding, I stayed up late finalizing ARPs. Chloe texted she was at a girls' night and might not answer. Daniel claimed he was at the gym. I went to bed alone, restless. Around 2 a.m., my phone vibrated: a random ping from our shared location app, the one we all used after Chloe once lost her phone. I almost ignored it, but curiosity made me open it. Her location dot blinked near the same address Daniel had given me months ago when he moved some of his gym gear to a friend's place. My chest tightened. I zoomed in. The dot didn't move. I stared at the screen for minutes, frozen, half convinced it was a glitch. But the next day, Chloe mentioned she'd stayed home all night. I smiled, pretending not to notice the lie sitting between us like smoke. From that moment, every word, every gesture, felt like a performance. Daniel's kisses grew shorter. Chloe's texts became oddly formal. My mind started spinning stories I didn't want to believe. One night, while Daniel showered, his phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't mean to look, but the preview flashed a name I knew too well, Chloe. The message read, "Same time tomorrow? I can't stop thinking about you." My throat closed. The world tilted. I remember staring at the letters until they blurred, as if my eyes refused to let them exist. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I placed the phone back exactly as it was, went to bed, and lay awake listening to the sound of the shower. That was the night I stopped being naive and started planning. I didn't want a confrontation, not yet. I wanted the truth to expose itself slowly, undeniably, in a way neither of them could escape. When Daniel came to bed, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "I can't wait to marry you." His voice trembled slightly. I almost pitied him, almost. The days that followed were heavy with silence. I played my part smiling, pretending, letting them think they were winning their little game. Inside, I was building something stronger, a quiet resolve. It wasn't revenge I craved, it was justice, the kind that unfolds under bright lights, surrounded by witnesses. And what better stage than the wedding itself? The morning sun spilled across the floorboards like honey that day, but I remember feeling nothing sweet about it. My stomach was a hollow pit, my mind sharper than it had ever been. For the first time in my life, I was looking at my best friend and my fiancé through a lens I didn't ask for, one that stripped every illusion bare. I needed proof, not just feelings. Feelings could be dismissed, gaslighted, labeled jealousy, but proof that was undeniable. So, I began observing them carefully, pretending to be the same warm, trusting woman I'd always been. I noticed small things first. When Daniel spoke, Chloe's eyes lingered too long. When I walked into a room, she'd flinch slightly, like she'd been caught mid-thought. One afternoon, we were doing a cake tasting. The bakery smelled of sugar and buttercream, and Daniel was running late. I sat with Chloe at the corner table, trying to focus on the sweetness instead of the bitterness rising in my throat. "Do you ever get nervous about love?" I asked her suddenly. She looked startled. "What do you mean?" "Like, about whether you're marrying the right person, or if someone else might have been better." Her fork paused midair. "That's dangerous thinking, Anna," she said softly. "If you love someone, you don't ask those questions. But what if someone else does?" I pressed. Her gaze flickered away. She took a slow bite of cake, chewing as if it required great effort. That silence was my answer. Later that night, while Daniel showered, I took a risk. I opened his laptop, the same one he used for work. I knew his password. He'd never changed it. A familiar blue screen blinked to life. Emails, spreadsheets, nothing unusual. Until I saw a folder named Event Details. Inside were invoices, but one stood out, a hotel reservation. The dates overlapped with the work trip. Daniel and Chloe had both disappeared for a weekend months earlier. My heart thudded painfully as I clicked it. 2 guests, same last name, his. My hands trembled so violently I could barely close the laptop. It's strange how your mind fights to protect you in moments like that. Part of me whispered, maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe she just helped him book it. But the truth doesn't need logic, it claws its way up until you can't breathe. The next morning, I went to the bridal boutique alone. Chloe was supposed to meet me there, but she texted last minute saying she was running late. I stood before the mirror, dressed in ivory lace, watching my reflection blur through tears I refused to let fall. The shop attendant asked if I was okay. I smiled and said, "Just emotional." Inside, I was planning a war. When Chloe arrived an hour late, her hair was freshly styled, makeup to polish for a casual fitting. She kissed my cheek and said, "Sorry, Daniel needed me to pick up something for the groomsmen." I nodded. "You're always helping him," I said lightly. She froze, but only for a second. You know me, she replied, laughing. I just like things done right. It was in that moment, her scent of Daniel's cologne faintly mixed with her perfume, that I decided I wouldn't cry, I wouldn't beg, I would let them believe they were safe. And then I would show them exactly what it meant to betray someone who trusted you with everything. A week before the wedding, I quietly reached out to my cousin Mia, a digital forensic specialist who owed me a favor. I didn't tell her much, just that I suspected Daniel was cheating. She offered to help without question. Within 2 days, I had what I needed: screenshots of text messages between Daniel and Chloe, hundreds of them. At first, I could only read a few lines before my vision blurred. They talked about me like I was a child, someone naive, someone kind to notice. They shared hotel rooms, kisses, lies. And then there was one that made my blood run cold. I wish it were you at the altar, not her. Her reply: someday, it will be. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at those words until the morning light shifted across the floor. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I just felt something inside me close, like a door locking forever. By the time the wedding rehearsal came, I had transformed. To everyone else, I looked radiant, calm, glowing, serene. But underneath the lace and smiles, I was steel. Chloe stood beside me during the rehearsal, adjusting my veil, complimenting my hair, acting every bit the loyal friend. Daniel kissed my hand in front of everyone, saying how lucky he was. They had no idea what was waiting for them. 2 nights before the ceremony, I visited the venue to meet the coordinator. I handed her a USB drive and asked if she could play a short surprise video during the wedding reception. She smiled warmly and agreed, no questions asked. That USB contained every message, every photo, every receipt. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the clock. Every sound felt amplified: the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of cars. I thought of the little girl I once was, the one who believed friendship was sacred, that love was safe. I whispered to that girl, "You'll be okay." When morning came, it was bright and clear, the kind of day brides dream about. The venue was adorned with white roses and gold ribbons. The air smelled of lilies and perfume. My heart, surprisingly, was calm. Chloe arrived early, radiant in her lavender bridesmaid dress. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen." I looked her straight in the eye and smiled. I know. During the ceremony, everything went perfectly. Vows exchanged, rings slipped onto fingers, applause echoing through the hall. To the guests, we looked like a couple destined for forever. To me, it felt like performing in a play whose ending I already knew. When the reception began, laughter and music filled the air. People toasted, danced, and congratulated us. Chloe sat close to Daniel, too close, her hand brushing his arm when she thought no one noticed. But I noticed, and so did the cameras, because while she thought she was standing in the safety of her lies, I had already given the signal to the coordinator. As the lights dimmed, I took the microphone. "Before we start dancing," I said, smiling sweetly, "I want to share something special, a little tribute to love and honesty." Guests clapped, expecting a slideshow of childhood photos or sweet moments. Instead, the screen flickered to life, showing the first message Daniel ever sent Chloe after we got engaged. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Then came another message, and another. Laughter turned into silence. Chloe's face drained of color. Daniel froze, his hand halfway to his glass. The room filled with the glow of their betrayal pictures, hotel confirmations, messages ending with "I love you." My voice didn't shake when I said, "Sometimes love isn't what it looks like in photos. Sometimes it hides behind smiles and toasts." The whispers grew into gasps. Someone stood up. Someone else covered their mouth. I turned to Daniel. "You said you couldn't wait to marry me," I said quietly. "Turns out, you couldn't wait to betray me either." Then I turned to Chloe. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but I felt nothing. "And you," I whispered, "were supposed to be my sister." I placed the microphone down and walked away from both of them slowly, deliberately, to the sound of stunned silence. The moment I stepped off that stage, it felt like the world split open behind me. Gasps, whispers, shuffling chairs, each sound echoed like a wave crashing against my back. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel their eyes burning into me, the audience of friends and family who had come to witness a wedding but ended up watching a funeral for trust. Outside the hall, the evening air was cool, almost merciful. I could hear muffled chaos inside, my mother's sharp voice, Daniel's stammering attempts to explain, Chloe's sobs. None of it touched me. I stood under a tree near the parking lot, looking up at the night sky. I'd imagined this day so many times, what I'd wear, what I'd say, how it would feel to be a wife. But the woman standing there wasn't a wife. She was something else entirely, broken, yes, but burning with a new kind of clarity. After a few minutes, Mia came outside. She didn't say anything, just handed me my bag. Her eyes were soft, but she knew better than to comfort me. There are moments in life when comfort feels like an insult. I drove away quietly, leaving behind the glittering lights and the smell of champagne. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw Daniel run out of the venue. He shouted my name, his suit jacket flapping in the wind, face pale and desperate, but I kept driving. He had been chasing lies for months. He could chase the truth alone for once. That night, I checked into a small hotel across town. The receptionist looked at my wedding dress, wrinkled and stained with dust, but didn't ask questions. She just handed me a key. When I entered the room, I took off the dress and hung it over the chair. It looked lifeless, like the version of me that had believed in forever. I sat on the bed, scrolling through the hundreds of unread messages flooding my phone, calls from my mother, texts from friends, even a few from Chloe. I didn't open any of them. I turned the phone face down and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in months, the silence felt honest. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling through the curtains. My eyes were swollen, but my mind felt clear. I ordered coffee and sat by the window, watching people on the street, ordinary people, going about their ordinary lives. I envied them, not because their lives were perfect, but because they still had the luxury of believing love was safe. By noon, I knew I had to face it all. Not to make amends, there were no amends left to make, but to reclaim my voice. When I finally returned to my apartment, Daniel was already there, sitting on the front steps like a child who'd lost his way. His tie was gone, shirt wrinkled, eyes red. "Anna, please," he said the moment I stepped out of the car. "Let me explain." I stared at him for a long time. "Explain what, Daniel? That you fell into her bed by accident? That every lie you told me was a misunderstanding?" He shook his head, his hands trembling. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean to." I laughed softly, bitterly. "You didn't mean to? You had months to mean it." Tears welled in his eyes. "I love you. I always have." "Then why her?" I asked quietly. He looked away, unable to answer. That silence told me everything I'd ever need to know. "I don't hate you," I said finally, "but I'll never forgive you. And I'll never forget what you took from me." He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. "You taught me something," I said. "That loyalty without truth is just a slow kind of death. I'd rather live alone than die beside a liar." Then I walked past him, closing the door behind me with a finality that echoed through my chest. Inside, everything smelled faintly of him, his cologne, his coffee, his ghost. I gathered the framed photos from the shelf, one by one, and placed them in a box. Each picture felt like a chapter. I was finally closing. Over the next few days, the story spread. Someone at the wedding had filmed the moment, the video played, and uploaded it online. Within hours, it went viral. Bride exposes cheating husband and mistress at wedding. Thousands of strangers commented, calling me brave, calling him disgusting, calling her worse. At first, I hated the attention, but then I realized something. For the first time, the truth was louder than the lies. Chloe tried to reach me once. She sent an email that began with, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I never meant to hurt you." I didn't reply. Some silences are sacred. "Daniel, on the other hand, kept trying. He showed up at my mother's house, sent flowers, even left letters on my doorstep. But guilt isn't love, and his words couldn't resurrect what he buried. Eventually, he stopped trying. Months passed. I moved out of the apartment we shared and started fresh in a small townhouse near the coast. Mornings became my healing ritual. I'd wake up early, walk barefoot along the sand, and let the sea wind entangle my thoughts. Sometimes, I still felt the sting of it all, the betrayal, the humiliation, but pain, I learned, doesn't last forever. It changes shape. One evening, I watched the sunset with a cup of tea in my hands. The horizon glowed in shades of gold and crimson, the kind of beauty that doesn't need anyone to see it to exist. And I realized that's what I wanted to be. Unapologetically whole, even in solitude. I'd stopped checking social media, stopped reading comments, stopped wondering what they were doing, because it didn't matter. They had to live with what they'd done. I only had to live with myself, and I was finally proud of who that woman was becoming. A few weeks later, I received a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a wedding invitation. Chloe's name wasn't on it, but Daniel's was. He was marrying someone else. I smiled softly, genuinely, not out of bitterness, but peace. Some people never change, and that's their curse to carry. That night, I burned the invitation in a small bowl by the window. The paper curled and blackened, the smoke rising like a ghost, finally leaving my home. And in that quiet moment, I whispered to myself, "You didn't lose them. They lost you." The following months unfolded like a slow sunrise, gentle, uncertain, but full of quiet promise. Healing didn't happen all at once. It came in small, invisible ways. A full night's sleep. A day when I could laugh without feeling guilty. A morning when I looked in the mirror and saw someone strong staring back at me instead of someone broken. I started therapy, though it took me weeks to admit I needed it. My therapist, a kind woman named Farah, never asked me to relive the wedding. Instead, she asked me about the before, the Anna who loved easily, who trusted completely, who saw friendship and marriage as unshakable. "Do you miss them?" she asked once, her voice soft. I thought about it for a long time before answering. "Sometimes," I said, "but not the people they became, the memories we had before they changed." Farah smiled knowingly. "That's the part of you that still loves honestly. Don't lose her." It was strange, but comforting, realizing that I didn't have to erase the love to survive the betrayal. I just had to stop letting it define me. I began journaling every night, a habit I hadn't had since college. At first, it was just fragments of thoughts, anger, disbelief, questions that would never be answered. But slowly, the entries changed. Gratitude started sneaking in. Gratitude for my mother, who had defended me with the fire of a lioness. For Mia, who had stood by me when everyone else was whispering. For myself, for not folding under the weight of shame that wasn't mine to carry. Sometimes I'd walk past the park where Daniel had first proposed. The memory used to hurt, but one evening, I sat on that same bench and watched a young couple laughing nearby. The girl's head rested on his shoulder, her eyes shining with the same trust I once had. And instead of bitterness, I felt something unexpected: hope. Because love itself hadn't betrayed me, only the people who failed to honor it. Around the same time, I started painting again, something I hadn't done in years. My first piece was a simple seascape, waves breaking against dark rocks, the horizon wide and endless. When I finished it, I realized the ocean had become my symbol for healing, unpredictable, powerful, but always moving forward. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The words were short, hesitant. "I'm sorry for everything. I wish you happiness." See, I read it once, then deleted it. I didn't need to respond. Forgiveness doesn't always require an audience. Sometimes it's just a quiet decision to stop letting someone else's choices anchor you in pain. A year passed before I truly felt like myself again. I had moved into a brighter apartment closer to my new art studio. Life had become beautifully ordinary: morning walks, afternoon painting, dinner with my mother on Sundays. Then, one spring evening, as I was locking up the studio, I saw Daniel across the street. He looked different, older, thinner, his hair starting to gray. Our eyes met for the briefest moment, and he froze, almost as if he wanted to cross the street, to speak, to explain again. But I just gave him a small nod and walked away. That moment didn't sting. It felt peaceful. I no longer needed him to suffer to feel free. My healing wasn't tied to his punishment. As weeks turned into months, my story began to reach people in ways I hadn't expected. I'd written about it anonymously on a storytelling forum just as a way to release it. But the post went viral. Thousands of women wrote to me, some thanking me for my courage, others sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival. Reading their words made me realize how universal pain is, but also how universal healing can be. We all break differently, but we rebuild the same way, piece by piece, truth by truth. And so, the story that once felt like my greatest humiliation became something else, a lifeline for others. One evening, Mia came over with a bottle of wine. "You know," she said, pouring us each a glass, "you should tell your story on a podcast or something. You've helped more people than you realize." I smiled. Maybe someday, but not to relive it, to remind people that even after the deepest betrayal, life can still be beautiful. We sat there for hours, watching the city lights through my balcony window. The world outside hummed softly, alive and forgiving. When Mia left, I stood by the window for a while, thinking about everything that had led me there, the friendship, the lies, the wedding, the fire that came after. And strangely, I felt gratitude for all of it, because it broke me open in ways that allowed light to finally reach the parts of me I'd ignored for too long. Before going to bed, I opened my journal one last time and wrote, "Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without the ache." And as I closed the book, I realized this was my ending. Not a fairy tale, not revenge, but peace. So if you're listening, maybe you've been where I was, betrayed, humiliated, left standing in the wreckage of someone else's lies. If that's you, hear me when I say, you are not the betrayal. You are what comes after it. The strength, the rebirth, the calm after the storm. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight for justice or revenge, but to quietly rebuild your life until peace becomes the loudest sound in the room. If you've made it this far with me, thank you for listening. I don't tell this story to make you hate anyone. I tell it because betrayal has a way of making you forget who you are. It makes you question your worth, your judgment, even your kindness. And I want to remind you of something that took me a long time to understand. Betrayal says nothing about the person who was faithful. It only reveals the truth about the ones who weren't. When the people you love choose deceit, they don't just break your heart, they show you who they've always been behind the mask. And as painful as that is, it's also a gift. Because you can't heal around lies. You can only heal in the light of truth. For a long time, I thought revenge would make me feel whole again. But the truth is, exposing them at the wedding wasn't revenge, it was release. It was me refusing to carry their secret anymore. Sometimes, standing up for yourself isn't loud. It's simply walking away with your dignity intact. And if you are standing in that same storm right now, if someone you trusted has betrayed you, please remember, this pain won't define you forever. It's a season, not a sentence. You'll wake up one day and realize that your heart, though scarred, is still capable of love, still capable of laughter. The betrayal will become a memory, but the strength you find because of it, that will stay. So when you look back, don't look with bitterness. Look with gratitude, because that pain carved space inside you for something better, for peace, for self-respect, for real love. And maybe, one day, you'll sit by your own window like I did, watching the sunset, and you'll smile not because it didn't hurt, but because you survived it. Thank you for listening to my story. And if tonight, you're lying awake wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, you will. You just have to choose yourself first. Anna.